Welcome back, guys. This is 250 Chat, your favorite show. So today we have a good topic for you. But before we start, I'd like to talk about Four Blooms for a second. Four Blooms is the place we're in today, and they have very good burgers and fries. You should try and check them out. Today, of course, you know you're on Prime TV. And before we start again, we would just like to bring up the topic. We are talking about child punishment, whether you should punish them or you should reason with them. So guys, before we begin, who has a burning thing to say? Bonita, you look as if you have something burning to say. Tell us, should you punish your child or should you reason with them?
I wouldn't punish my child. I would find a common ground to communicate with them. But I also think in this day and age that we're in, it's quite hard to be able to understand kids with the change that is going on, with all these things happening in their life with school. It's quite hard to be able to understand them. But I think we have a few people in the house that could, give us a few experiences, and then we could probably take it off from there. Dean and Sherry.
Juanita, I have a question for you.
Yes.
You said you would not punish your child, right? So there are many types of punishment. There's corporal punishment, but there are also other ways you could punish a child without necessarily having to spank them, for example. So you would not punish your child at all?
I wouldn't punish my child. I would always find a way to communicate, to always talk to them. And it's not just reasoning to me, it's more of being more than just friends, but having them understand this is good and this is bad, having them decide to be able to, having them like being able to decide this is good and this is bad is what I would take on from that.
So how would you be able to make them understand that there are good things and bad things if there are no consequences to the bad things?
There is always a consequence, I believe. At least to me, there is a consequence. Even with the good things, because even when you do something great, the outcome of it is what you'd look at to be the advantage or the disadvantage, I believe. So, yeah.
So I'm really curious to see what Bonita's experience is going to be like when she actually has children, because she mentioned not really being in favor of punishment. I think that's going to be really interesting to see. I've seen how kids can be when they don't get any form of punishment, not necessarily physical, but even timeouts or having things taken away from them. I was a babysitter before. I saw kids really become extremely unruly. So yeah, we'll need to check back in maybe 5 to 10 years and see how that's working out for her.
Let me jump in real quick here.
Yes.
So, I don't know if I should talk as someone who was given a lot of chibokos, still traumatized. But again, I'm probably thankful that they actually whooped me.
They whooped you?
Yes.
They whooped your.
But again, as someone who's raising a child, I've never placed my hands on him.
Uh-huh.
However, even through reasoning with him, there are certain things that I do just to show him that I've punished him. Now, my son, whenever I tell him, like, I'm going to give you chiboko, he just laughs at me and he's like, Daddy, what's wrong with it? But when you tell him, Dylan, go face the wall, he's going to cry because he knows he has done something wrong. So there is reasoning. But again, you do not put out that element of punishing them because they've done something wrong.
True.
But I still think that's punishment.
Yeah.
That is still punishment. And I think we need to be very clear that punishment doesn't have to be physical. And for me, I don't think I want to choose between reasoning and punishment. I think both of them work. Yeah, both punishing and reasoning with them. But I also feel like reasoning really works a lot more than punishment works. And the reason I'm saying this is because with my 1-year-old, like I actually reason with him and he understands. Like if I talk to him sometimes and I tell him, it can even be something small, like toddlers, they want to follow the mom everywhere around the house and all of that. So I just tell him, just stay right here. I'll be back. Maybe I'm going to pick something. I'm like, I'm just going upstairs. I'm going to pick something. Stay right here. Do you understand that you can wait for me? And then he's like, yes. And then he waits. But then I'm just talking about the reasoning. Punishment, though, it has to be there. Because, Bonita, you're saying sometimes you just have to communicate with them. But even still with communicating, they're going to do bad things. Like they're going to go wrong even when they're teenagers, Yeah, they're going to. Yeah. So still there also, I'll punish.
But can we also address age in terms of like at what Sorry. Like, at what age do you decide this is when I can actually communicate with or reason with my child? Oh, this at this certain age, at a very young age, you can't actually reason because most of the times they don't understand you. They don't understand.
Number one, I think first, what Sherry said, the two can actually coexist. Because how we are treated as adults, I think that is what we need to do with our children. Because when you do a mistake at work, unless it's just gross misconduct, you're probably, they call you in, talk to you, give you a letter, and you stay until you do the same mistake, and then the other measures are taken. So, if a child is walking around the house and probably sleeps and breaks a plate, the first instinct shouldn't be to beat them. No, you actually have to show them that they've done something wrong. But if it is repeat, then that is when you bring in the element of punishment. And you're talking about age. When it comes to age, because I believe kids have an instinct. That is why they tell you that if a child meets someone and automatically starts withdrawing, know something is very wrong there. So when you talk to them, even from a young age, she talked about a 1-year-old. Dylan is 4 years. But you talk to them and they start understanding. So the earlier the better. For us, we were traumatized. For us, everything was just bring a slipper, beat. So we grew up fearing to do a lot of things. You'd walk around on eggshells around the house. So the two can coexist. But what I would say is the earlier the better to start talking to them, because that is when they actually start opening up to you. When they do something wrong, they will not have the need to lie to you. They'll tell you like, hey, I've done something wrong. And even when you ask them, they will not shy away, but they will tell you what they've done. So the earlier that you start establishing that relationship, that rapport, the better to actually have a relationship with them.
I have a question. I think Bruce and Lydia could probably answer this. What would you think, or what would you pick out to be the most? How were you raised that you think would change in terms of either being punished or in terms of even your parents communicating to you, or if there is lack of communicating? Because I think we also have to start from a ground where we're trying to figure out how we were raised and what was wrong with that and what we wouldn't change, because maybe being beaten was actually a good thing for us at some point because of the time we were in back then, right? And what would it look like for you to punish your child? Like, what would it be?
So in my case, I have to give a disclaimer. I don't have children, and I really think that's important to say. No, I think it's important to say because I do think that people probably have a ton of ideas that mostly fly out of the window as soon as you have an actual child, an actual human that you're raising that has its own independent mind and will and desires to do things. So these are all my theories that I have now. We'll see how they evolve when I do actually reach that stage, if I do. But to answer your questions first about what I would do differently from how I was raised, I think that I saw my parents sometimes make decisions about how they punished me in anger. And I actually saw my pastor once speak about that, about the most important thing being not making that decision while you're angry, because then it comes from a place of emotion. So even if you are trying to reason with them or trying to get them to understand that their actions have consequences, if you're not in a rational state, that's going to impact what you think is appropriate to do. So that's one of the things that I think I would change. And then your second question was about how would I punish my child, or I guess if I would. For me, it's about understanding the behaviors that the children have demonstrated first. And one of the things that I've come to learn, I read a lot of articles about these things because I feel like you really need to mentally prepare for kids. So I'm really trying, is that children handle what they can. So when you see a child having a meltdown or a temper tantrum, there's usually a reason behind it. Maybe you've had them outside too long. You've had them walking too long. Maybe they're overstimulated because there are too many people around them or too many relatives who want to kiss them and pinch their cheeks and all of these things that we force children to do, but that they're independent beings who may not be in the mood for that. So I think I would try to look at the situations that my child is in and understand, are they being overstimulated? What can I change about this environment so that it is something manageable for them? And then in terms of reasoning, I think I would want to establish a line between when we're going to reason and when we're not. Because I need my child to know that if we're crossing the street and I tell them to stop, this is not a time to have a conversation about why. We're not reasoning in that moment because I see a car coming that you don't see coming and I just need you to do what I say. Whereas there are other scenarios where I think it's more appropriate to sit down and have that talk and look at the whys behind the things that I'm expecting from them.
Yeah. Well, for me, I don't think reasoning is even in the picture. Because for me, everything is biblical. And in the Bible, it says, spare the rod and spoil the child. So that is how I was brought up. I was forged. I was forged through iron, and my child will also pass through the same kind of fire.
Listen, I know from experience that beating a child does not really help. It doesn't change much. But there are many ways to punish a child without necessarily having to lay a hand on them. So if that is a thing, if that exists and it has been proven countless times that it works, why not go for that? My child, I'm not laying a hand on them, but I know there are many other ways I'll be able to prove to them through reasoning and through, other consequences that their actions are bad and that they should stop doing them. Other than just create an environment where they're only fearing a beating and they end up also fearing a punishment.
You know, they say, is it iron sharpens iron? So for me, my child has to be iron. Like, yeah, I was beaten, so man, you just have to take the beating. If you've done that, for me, those are the consequences that you have to deal with. I told you not to do this, you did this.
So for you, it's physical. It has to be physical punishment.
Physical beating. And then after that, I wipe your tears and say, I'm sorry, but you see, Baba, this is what you did. And now, next time, you shouldn't do this, because if you do this, you'll be beaten. Let me give you an example. When I was growing up, I used to be a really naughty kid. I don't know whether any of you can tell that, because now I'm so nice. But
It really hasn't changed much, but it's okay.
yes, now I'm
We
such
have
a nice
accepted
guy.
you.
Anyway, so when I was growing up, I used to have this habit of I used to enter my mom's bag and maybe take a few vicheris, coins, and go and buy ball gum and sweets. Anyway, so there was this time, you know these things. The problem with these things is that they evolve. So there's this time that I took more than I needed. So I took 100 shillings Kenyan. And I went to buy ballgum. Ballgum at that time is like 1 shilling. So of course I had so much change. So being a child, just I forgot that I had coins in my pocket. So when I've gone to shower, of course I leave my shorts where they were, and then my mom's like, what's this money in your pocket? I'm like, all of a sudden I couldn't answer where that money was, and then she realized that I'd actually taken, because now she went and did a check and she realized she's losing 100. Let me tell you, when my father had that, the kind of beating I was given, it was I would say that beating was almost divine, because from that time I have never ever stolen anything ever again in my life. Because even when I see someone has left even if that person is not there, or even if I find like money on the road, I leave it, because it just reminds me of that kind of divine beating that I was given. So me, I cannot wait to give my children that same kind of lesson when they begin to.
It's called the historical open.
It really is.
Well, for me, I believe, yes, I'm going to beat my child. That's for sure, because that's how they're going to learn and they're going to be straight. But you can never also really be close-minded and just say, okay, just a beating is what is deserved. There are other occasions where you may be telling the child that you shouldn't have done this, you should have done this. That works too. So you need to evaluate and also have an open mind. So you cannot have a fixed template for your child. You need to always be flexible.
I think I was a naughty kid too. I was raucous. I was troublesome to, I look back at it and I'm like, I gave my mom a hard time, And with that came a lot of whooping. You know, I got spanked on a daily, to be honest. But I've realized that it didn't really change much. Especially because, like you were saying...
It didn't change?
No, not really.
It didn't
It
change?
didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, because like Lydia was saying, sometimes you see a lot of that kind of reaction comes from a place of anger in the moment. And it's righteous anger because
Yes.
the kid has done something wrong, right? But then when you resort to immediately like spanking them or beating them without giving them enough time to realize that what they've done is actually wrong, you get to a place where a kid will only fear doing something because they're fearing the beating, not because they understand inherently that that is something wrong that they shouldn't be doing in the first place, you know. So you'd see that whenever I knew that there was no consequence, that I wasn't being seen or anything, I would resort back to, you know, the troublesome actions that I was doing in the first place. But when she started actually like sitting me down and saying, this is wrong because of this and this and this is how it's affecting you, this is how it can turn into a pattern that is going to be bringing you trouble in the near or, you know, far future, then I started understanding that there was a reason behind the beating that I hadn't gotten in the first place, but I understood it now because we were actually having that conversation. She was telling me this is how it could affect your life in a bad way, you know, and that's when I started to actually change. That came a bit late in my life, unfortunately, but that is when I started seeing a positive impact. So for me, if I had a child, I mean, I'm human. I'm not going to say that no matter what, I'm not going to beat them. I don't know. Maybe I will have that kind of reaction every once and then. But I will make an actual intentional effort not to get to that place. To actually sit them down, talk to them, and then if the behavior continues, there are much more ways to make a child feel the consequences of their action without actually having to beat them.
Like what?
Take a few privileges away from them, for example, that you know they like, right? Example. Let's say a kid,
TV time.
let's say they like watching cartoon, right? And then you take away the TV or you take away the decoder, right? For like 2 weeks. The kid is coming home, he is getting bored out of his mind because the thing he used to be, he goes to is not there anymore. That's a consequence.
Me, I'm hurting myself now. I bought a decoder with my money. Why shouldn't I watch it? Why shouldn't I watch what I want to watch? Why shouldn't
Let me
I
tell
watch
you.
Prime TV?
Okay, let me tell you, like Bruce just said,
Nice one, though. Nice one.
like Bruce just said,
It's called ad placement.
I know. Shameless marketing.
like Bruce just said, I don't recall because you guys say that you're stubborn. Now I have two siblings. I have an elder sister and a younger brother, and I think probably what they were supposed to do all fell on me. So I was like times 100. I remember there's a time in 5 days I was actually given 100 cans. I would get 5 in the morning, 5 in the evening. My mom would wake up in the morning and he's like, Dean, before I even go to the shower, come. Go there. Come back home, she's like, Dean, before I relax, first come here. But I don't recall any day that I didn't do anything because I was like, they're going to whoop me. No. I would actually be like, you know what?
Did it anyway.
You mean it wasn't a
Either way,
factor?
I'm actually going to do it. So I would go, well knowing I'll come back. I'll even come back, greet you immediately. On the ground, you come ask me how many, I'm like 10. Papa. I get up, I go. Tomorrow, I'm on it again. So, in Kinyarwanda they say, ingoni ivuna igufuka ni ivuninje so. So, yes.
What does that mean?
The stick may break your bone, but it won't break your habit.
Yes. You get it. So, you will whoop the child. But trust me, if you do not psychological or mentally make them understand the wrong they are doing, that will not go off. It will not go off the table.
The thing is, I think it's quite hard to decide on how you're going to raise your child and have like a very solid lineup of what you're going to do and what you're not going to do for your child. I think it's really hard. But I think for me, it's more of instilling habits and also finding ways on how they can always reflect and decide what's good and what's bad. And I think I would say that depending on what Dean said on how punishing a child doesn't really hurt them or break their bonds. It just sort of creates habits. So I think for me, we're trying to change the habits and not make them a lifestyle or something that they usually fall back onto. If they're in fear, then they're going to run away. If they're in fear, they're not going to communicate what they did and how we can solve that. But can we also talk about the fear that is instilled in the child and the effects it has on that child as well?
But it's no.
Especially coming from him. He
Well,
should
yeah,
be the
coming from
one
it,
to...
because well, the fear. I don't think at any one point, like he said, I was scared. No, I was never scared because I did what I wanted to do. Well, knowing I'll come back and get it, and that was fine with me. But like you just asked, probably he should be like in a better position to understand what that will do to the child.
You know, the thing is, I think with my parents, they had made it an art form. Because it wasn't really the beating. It's the drama before the beating that just get you.
Drum roll.
I know, but this one's
Okay,
going to
fast.
happen.
Okay, so fast. You've done this. Is it you who's done this? Yes. Do you accept? You know how you're like, don't know. Is it me? Was it me? So we just go and pick a nice stick. Just go and choose. So you see, it's there's a whole fanfare to it where you now start thinking, okay, so maybe I shouldn't have done this. As you're picking, you're trying to get the small stick where that you feel maybe after 2 canes maybe it will break. But then after all that, I said no, let's not get a stick. I'll just use our mwiko. I don't know, you know what a mwiko is? These things for cooking ugali. Hard. Said now, in fact now, yeah, you've gone outside, you've looked for that stick, this is not sufficient. Let me get a mwiko, and then you're beaten with a mwiko. So you're like, I mean, it was just that whole fanfare that would just really traumatize me. And I don't think, well, the beating was painful. Me, I don't like, personally, I don't know. I just don't like being hit behind there, because I used to be hit on my bum. So, and it was, for me, it was really traumatic. So I realized, I formulated a linkage between what I've done and the trauma. So I was like, okay, so if I don't do this again, then I don't have to face this traumatic experience. So that's how my behavior became better. And that, for me, people have different ways of dealing with it. But for me, I realized, okay, so if I stay away from that, then I don't have to deal with this trauma.
So for me, like I was saying, you know, there's no manual to doing this. You cannot like have it automatically set or have a plan. So for me, it's neither nor. It's not that I'm going to choose. I can do punishment or I can do reasoning. Where I need to do reasoning, I'll do the reasoning. Where there needs to be punishment, there's going to be punishment. And you know, and this is something that I kept on saying, you cannot have these things planned out before. You're learning on the job. On the job, that's when you're going to know. When you have someone to raise, that's when you're going to start knowing what works for them and this what doesn't work for them. I think parents who have even more than one children, they know this is what's going to work best with this child versus the other child. So you cannot have it figured it out from the get-go. Actually, I think you and Dean are possibly talking about the same thing. Because what I'm hearing, let me explain the way I'm understanding it. Because for Dean, the trauma of being beaten was like, I'm going to get that beating anyway. So there's sometimes that trauma can do that. Like you just turn off that, whatever effect it's going to have. And then, exactly. And then there's someone else who's going to be like, in order not to get this beating, let me not do this. And now that we're talking about our experiences, I remember when we're little and you broke a plate or a glass or a vase or something, you would spend the entire day just traumatized, because if my mom comes back, first of all, you're going to have to explain yourself. Like before she hears it from anyone, you should be able to come and explain it. So everyone even starts rehearsing with you. They're like, okay, so what are you going to say? No, don't say it like that. Start like this. First say good evening. How was your day? And then like there was just a lot of protocol to it, and that could actually help. Because of the way you're going to declare that you've broken that, maybe you're going to get that beating. She's going to understand you, or You never know. You're just going to get that beating anyway. So I feel like it's either you could still be afraid, or like the same way Dean was just not. She was like, I'm going to get it anyway. So that's still trauma.
You see, I don't really think that it was the trauma. I think it was not understanding why they're stopping from doing this. I'll give you an example. I grew up in Imbara, so there was a cinema called Lotus. So every school day, I would leave school.
Me too.
School, change into a t-shirt that I have in my bag, and then go for the movies. And I would get a beating. However, I never understood why they were beating me. They didn't tell me it's dangerous. Probably you're going to get mad, someone can kill you, or someone's going to kidnap you. No, I didn't understand that. Me, all I knew is that stopping me from going. Then they come, they beat me probably. Maybe in my mind I was like, maybe it's because I've come late, but I don't care. I'll find my way. So the most important thing is to understand something before you actually get into the actual punishment. So regardless of what the child has done, if they do not understand that this is actually wrong to do, then you will always... No impact. Yes.
What are some of the habits that we've developed from our childhood, especially from being beaten and punished?
Well...
Patterns as well.
The patterns... well, I think I've had to let go of most of many of them because I'm raising a child and I have to really do better by him. But I realized that there are times when Dylan will do something and my first instinct is like to grab him out but then I immediately, because like when I shout at him and he turns and he's scared, I just have to remind myself like, hey, go slow. Go slow. For me personally, I think it is the trauma, because even right now I will do something and then when my mom calls me I'll be like, okay,
what did I do? Yes.
I'm not even staying home. I mean, I've moved out and everything. I'm old, I'm an adult. But she'll call me and then I'm like, what have I done? So that fear, that's number one. Number two, not easily opening up.
Lying as well.
Yes, not easily opening up. And like, she'll call me and then she'll ask me, she's like, Dean, where are you? Meanwhile, I'm probably like in a bar or somewhere and I'll probably tell her you went to visit a friend.
Yes.
And it is not like, but just instinct.
Mm.
And then later you'll be like, but why? Why do I just lie to her? And then lastly, like they say, opening up. Maybe it was open up. Okay, I think I'm going to, I disagree with what Muga said, that he's going to punish his kids. He's going to whoop them. And I really think that will set a very bad precedent, because he's going to end up having kids who fear him rather than respect him. And that is going to bring a disconnect between him and the kids. What is most important is to always have time for your kids. And as parents, we should create that time to sit with them, talk to them, give them advice, and let them feel that we are actually not animals. I remember I have a friend, and every time the dad would come home, everyone would be like, Lion is home. They used to refer to the father as Lion. Why? Because of how they used to fear him and how he used to whoop them. And in the end, they never had a relationship with the father. So that's how they end up in a lot of shenanigans. And of course, that brings up very many issues. It brings out kids not respecting you. It brings out kids not being open with you, not being honest with you, always lying to you. So as parents, our first priority should always be to create rapport with our kids. Let's listen to them. We shouldn't always be the ones talking to them, but also listen, sit down and listen to them and understand them, because that is the only way that we can be able to create a template or a formula of how we are going to raise them.
Okay, so I see that we're out of time, and I just wanted to say one thing, especially about punishment and reasoning. And a lot of it is you learn on the job, actually, because you have a certain way you're raised, and the kind of punishments that you received or whatever reasoning, which I really don't think I got. Yeah, you learn on the job when you have a child. Recently, my son, he was angry about something, and then he grabbed my phone and hit it because he was angry and he wanted to show me, yes, I'm angry. And my first instinct was to hit his little hands. Not so much, but I did it also to show him you shouldn't do that. And after that, he did it again. Like he would actually do it just to show me I can do this. As opposed to when one day I was like, I don't know if this is going to work, but I just told him, you cannot drop my phone like that. So every time, even when it drops, he brings it to me. He's like, Mommy, your phone. So you learn on the job sometimes, because we've grown up with a certain way and certain traits, and we go into parenting thinking, this is what I'm going to do, but it's so different. It's very different once you get there, and even along the way. Even our parents are still learning. So it's something that you learn along the way. Yeah.
Talking about the effects of punishment on a child, we should also talk about the effects of the words we use when talking to the child and the language. I know people who grew up like they would be given beatings, but there would also be words coming with the beatings, something along the lines, and they were loving parents, to be honest. But you tell a child who's 7, 8 years old, you say, I gave birth to you, I can kill you and give birth to other children.
Verbal abuse.
Or to beat them. That immediately, instills in them that, my life is not actually that valuable.
I can easily be.
I could go and she would really give birth to another person tomorrow and be replaced, And then you see that these kids, years later, they will tell you that I grew up actually questioning if this was my real mother or if she adopted me. Because the words did not show love to me. Because it's a kid, he is easily influenced by what he's hearing. So we should be very, very careful about what we say to our kids, whether we beat them, like Moga is advocate,
Yes.
or find other ways to show the consequences. But let's be very careful about the words we use when talking to little kids who are easily influenced by what they hear.
Bruce brought up a fantastic point about the power of words when it comes to children. That's something I feel really passionate about because I've just kind of observed in my own experiences how that influences a child. I was with my cousin who's 8 years old in the States a few weeks ago, and she was doing something really annoying. I would use that word to describe it, but I didn't use that word to her. I told her that I needed her to stop what she was doing. And she said, "Oh, do you think I'm annoying?" And it was really heartbreaking to hear that because the way she said it, I could tell that word had been used with her. I didn't know if she was getting it at school or at home or what exactly, but I could see it was already starting to weigh really heavily on her, and she was considering herself an annoying person. And I try to be really open to those experiences and learn from them. And so I 100% agree. Words matter. Even in anger, we have to really think about how we speak to our children, even if we need to reprimand them, and use words that are going to teach them lessons but not break them in the process.
Yeah, that's true. So I think all of us maybe are in some sort of agreement that no child should just go unmanned or just fly by night kind of fly by night kind of children just living
So
living with their own wings.
No child should be a drone.
So guys, unfortunately we have to cut this conversation short. It's been really good, but maybe we can talk about this next time. I'm sure we have other topics that we could be discussing. So guys, of course you know the drill. You can follow us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at 250chat. Also follow our pages of Prime TV _Rwanda on Twitter and Prime TV on Facebook and Instagram. So guys, also we have to acknowledge 4Blooms. They've been really gracious to us and let us use their space, and you should check them out. Until next time, au revoir.